Hello there, my friends. How do you play Dungeons and Dragons? Well, I am Pittsburgh Pat, and I teach people how to play Dungeons and Dragons, especially beginners. I'm an Adventure League DM, if you know what that means, and if you don't worry about it. I teach middle schoolers how to play and grade schoolers how to play. So obviously, this is a game that has dragons in it, and it has dungeons in it, and it's set in generally a medieval period, but be set in outer space, all kinds of things. But let's just define what is Dungeons and Dragons, right? So Dungeons and Dragons is a game. It's an RPG. So the R stands for roll, the P stands for playing, role playing, and the G stands for game. So it's a game. So it has a board sometimes. There's little dice that you roll, and it has weirdly shaped dice. It has figurines that you might move around on a board, and it has books that have rules in them. But essentially, right, at its basics, it's a role-playing game. So what does that mean? Well, think about a role, right? So most of the time we use that word role, we're thinking about R-O-L-E. We're talking about not rolling dice, but R-O-L-E as an actor plays a role, right? So if an actor plays a role, there's the actor and there's the character that the actor is playing. So let me show you a little bit about the character sheet. This is the main part of Dungeons and Dragons, and this can be very confusing to beginners. Look at this. Just look at this sheet. Look at all the things that are on this sheet. This can be very intimidating and confusing. Look at this handwritten one. This can be really confusing. But basically, you could play this entire role-playing game. You could play it without this sheet. But this sheet informs people of what their character is like. So it's almost like a backstory for a character, right? So for instance, in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker's backstory is he's a farm boy. He has ambitions of being a hero, but he has this unknown legacy and ancestry that is informing his longing for heroism, and he has abilities that he hasn't discovered yet. So these are the abilities, right, that you start with. They're right over here. So this is the basic part of the game. And I'm going to show you these ability scores, and you can play a whole game with just using these 6 statistics, right? These are called your primary attributes, right? Or your ability scores. So on most character sheets, and there are different kinds, you'll find this information generally on the left-hand side of the page. Just remember, in American culture and most Western cultures, we read from left to right, so think of it in those terms. So you're looking at this from the left. So basically you have 6 attributes that inform you of your character. And you have many other things as well that you can add to this, but this is the basic thing that we usually use. So each of these has a score, right? And next to it, it has a modifier. So based on these scores, there are these little numbers on this page. They're little. I like the ones where they're big. So like you have an ability score, but then you have this modifier. So what does this mean, right? So if I have a -1 in strength, if I am asked to roll a strength roll, I would roll this 20-sided die. Isn't this a cool looking piece of gaming equipment? This is the thing you're going to use the most. So I rolled a 19. So I would look at my sheet, and my dungeon master would say, hey, roll me a strength check. And I roll 19, and I subtract 1 because of this modifier right here, -1. And I would have an 18 on that roll. And what does that mean? Well, so the game is made up of player characters. That's probably going to be you. And one dungeon master. And the dungeon master is also a player at the table who is participating in this interactive adventure. So basically, Dungeons and Dragons, it's not necessarily a board game, although you can move pieces around a board. It's more like an interactive story, right? It's all about storytelling. So when the dungeon master is telling the story, he's going along telling setting up a scene for the player characters to interact in. The classic one is you're all in a tavern, right? So you're gathered in a tavern and you're talking. Now maybe there's a arm wrestling contest going on, right? And so the dungeon master says, okay, do you want to enter the arm wrestling contest? And you say yes. Well, you're going to roll your strength, probably a strength check. And so we rolled a 19 minus 1. We have an 18. And now let's say our opponent will roll a strength check. And he also has a minus 1 in strength, but he rolls a 13. 13 minus 1 is 12. So your roll is 18. His roll is 12. You win. You win that arm wrestling contest. Die rolls are used for parts of the story that you might want to relegate to chance. And everyone likes to roll their dice. That's like a big part of this game. So rolling dice is a lot of fun. So a lot of DMs will encourage that sort of activity, but it's not absolutely necessary. So for instance, if you are going upstairs to your room at the tavern, you've rented a room for the night, and you're trying to open the door, you don't necessarily have to roll a strength check to open a door. That's a normal activity, right? Unless there's some special property about this door. Maybe it's an extremely heavy oaken door. Or maybe you've been weakened by the feats of strength that you've been participating in, the contests. So that would be an occasion where you could, the DM could decide whether or not you need to roll a strength. So I hope that you understand that. Okay, so if you understand what, that's basically called an ability check. You're checking one of these abilities. So let's just go briefly over the 6 types of abilities that a dungeon master will ask you to use in an ability check. And this is just a very cursory look at this, and we can go into great detail later if you want. Please put it in the comments below. If I'm not explaining this clearly, I will be happy to explain any aspect of it to you. All right, so we have strength, we have dexterity, we have constitution, we have intelligence, we have wisdom, and we have charisma. Now, what do all those mean? Well, strength is pretty self-explanatory, and a lot of people like to use the tomato analogy. So strength, for instance, how many bushels of tomatoes could you lift, right? Maybe that's what you might think of with strength, right? Dexterity, how many tomatoes can you juggle, or could you juggle tomatoes? Maybe that's a dexterity check. Constitution, if there was a tomato eating contest, how many could you eat? Or if you ate a bad tomato, would it affect you? Would you get sick, or would it poison you? Intelligence. Intelligence would be knowing the fact that a tomato is a fruit and not a vegetable. So it's kind of book knowledge. Wisdom. Now, a lot of people get wisdom and intelligence mixed up. So what's wisdom as opposed to intelligence? Well, intelligence is like learned intelligence through like maybe schoolwork or that type of thing. Wisdom is more like school of hard knocks, right? Like experience. So wisdom on the tomato analogy would be knowing that a tomato does not go into a fruit salad, even though it's technically a fruit, right? So you wouldn't put it in with like watermelon and grapes and that sort of thing. Generally. Wisdom would also be like knowing that there are, you walk into a forest and that you may be aware that there are dangerous creatures that inhabit this type of forest. That would be like a wisdom check. Charisma is like social interaction. So say a charisma check might be your ability to sell a fruit salad which has tomatoes in it. Something like that. So that's just a very basic overview of what these ability traits are and what Dungeons and Dragons is. It's really an interactive story. The Dungeon Master brings a situation to the table. The players around the table tell the Dungeon Master what they want to do in that particular situation, and then there's an outcome. And the Dungeon Master tells them what the outcome of their actions are. And they can be informed by rolling dice and doing ability checks, but not necessarily. It's not absolutely necessary. And keep in mind, these are rules to Dungeons and Dragons, but the main rule of Dungeons and Dragons is to have fun. So if these rules are getting in the way of your fun, don't use them. If they enhance the fun, use them. All right, so that's all for me. I teach Dungeons and Dragons, and thank you for subscribing to the channel. We are over 14,000 subscribers now. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you on the next video, and we will discuss some more details on this character sheet in the next video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I answer almost all comments if they are nice and polite, as I try to be. And I hope you have a great day out there. Happy rolling of dice and happy Dungeons and Dragons playing.